Do you like to see your kids happy? So this is kind of a follow-up video to a really popular video we did last week called The Hard Talks that has to do with speaking to our children about addiction and addictive behaviors, which is kind of a hard thing to talk about. In the last video, we spent a lot of time talking about caffeine, talking about addiction to caffeine, symptoms, withdrawals. What we want to talk about today isn't a direct addiction and is not seen by the American Psychological Society as a direct addiction. However, it is a very common cause of addictive behavior, especially in children, but actually this one hits adults just as hard. Mr. Aksel himself had to help me with this addiction once in the past. So what we're here to talk about today is social media addictive behavior, social media being Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, things like that. Some of them are designed to be a little less addictive, like Instagram is designed to be a little less addictive. Facebook, YouTube are certainly designed to be more addictive in the way they set the algorithms so that you constantly see things that are based on stuff you've already seen that kind of keep you going down the rabbit hole, right? Now, like I say, it's not something that's an actual like recognized addiction, but as we talked about last week, addictive behavior can be something that is, well, let's just define it. Addictive behavior being anything that you do that starts to affect your life, regardless of whether it is bad for you or is hurtful to you or hurtful to others or not. Hi, Miss Rose. And this is one of those things that actually has been shown to be a common cause of addictive behavior, though it's not widely recognized as itself as an addiction. But it's something that we wanted to talk about because I know I've dealt with it. I know Mr. Axel's dealt with it. And he was going to talk about it a little bit, you know, to give that kid's perspective of it. But the reason I titled this video, "Do you like to see your kids happy?" is because addictive behaviors and addictions are things that we can work together on as parents and children. And one of the most common side effects, one of the most common symptoms of addictive behavior is aggressiveness, rebelliousness, moodiness, and a lot of that comes with insomnia and sleep issues and things along those lines. So what I wanted to start off talking about is what makes things like social medias and YouTube something that is so easy to fall into an addictive behavior. I'm going to start off, and then I'm going to let Axel have his turn. But I think that honestly what made it addictive for me, and as you guys know, I mostly don't touch it much anymore. I took it off my phone and several other things because Axel helped me out with that. But I think what made it with me is it didn't start off being addictive behavior. It just became something that was easy to use to fill in time when I didn't want to be bored. Though being bored is good for us. It allows us to be introspective. It allows us to explore things in our minds and use our imaginations. But I think when I noticed being a little more addicted to it was when I had gotten to the point that it had become so habitual that every time I didn't have anything else to do or didn't have something else to do, even for just 30 seconds or for 5 minutes, I would catch myself mindlessly scrolling through things and, you know, not even really paying that much attention to it. Just sort of scrolling through, right? And yet a lot of those things, you know, they say 80% of news is bad news, and I kind of agree with that. You know, 80% of what you see on there are things that have negative connotations that tend to raise our blood pressure, tend to make us a little more frustrated, tend to make us even lash out. And I know that I think a lot of the causes are just overuse, becoming habitual to the point that you're doing it without thinking about it. Mr. Axel, what do you think are some of the common causes that get kids to start experiencing addictive behavior towards things like YouTube, social media, things along those lines? Now you have to get a little closer and speak up. There you go. What makes it addicting?
It makes it addicting because it makes you laugh, but it's hard to get off of it when it makes you laugh and you think it's funny.
This is a key point here that I was going to make. It's an escape, like anything else. We talked about this last week in the hard talks videos. It's an escape, and escapes are good. Sometimes you need escapes. We talked about video games a little bit in the last one, and books and TV shows and things along those lines. Escapes are good, and like we said in the last video, anything in moderation, anything in leveled, measured amounts, right? The problem becomes when we start to seek out the escape over the top of our own responsibilities, or we start to seek out the escape regardless of whether we're hurting the feelings of those around us, whether we're even hurting ourselves. So it's like, and this is where we talked about a little bit about the addictive behavior, even with things that aren't technically addicting last week. And it comes down to, like we say, overuse, just overuse. And that's because we like the escape, right? But if we start seeking out escapes rather than confronting our challenges, this creates a big issue that leads me to the first symptom I wanted to talk about of addictive behavior, which is a loss of confidence. You won't notice it right off the bat, but here's the thing. The more a person goes into these escapes and shuns their responsibilities, shuns taking on challenges because, well, this is more fun, the more someone does that, the less challenges they're overcoming, the less things that they're accomplishing. So once you realize you've dumped 5 hours into YouTube, how do you feel about yourself?
I feel bad about myself.
Feel bad about yourself. Why?
Because I didn't spend time with my family.
You didn't get your chores done.
Yeah.
You didn't accomplish anything that day. And when we go to bed at night feeling like we didn't accomplish anything during the day, it hurts our self-esteem, our confidence just a little bit. And then it compounds day after day after day after day. And after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, our confidence kind of goes in the gutter, doesn't it? And when our confidence goes in the gutter, we're not feeling good about ourselves. How do we tend to act towards other people when we don't feel good about ourselves?
We kind of act angry, upset.
Nailed it. Aggressively. We tend to act aggressive. Have you been reading my notes?
No.
That's right, though. And that's another symptom, is we tend to begin at acting aggressively towards others, especially if we see that person as not allowing us our fix, not allowing us that escape that we're craving, right? And part of that aggression also comes from, getting to that point where we're uncontrollably mentally stuck on it, to the point that it's the only thing we're thinking about. If YouTube, social media, something somebody said, something somebody commented, gets stuck in our craw, as my grandma used to say, then we have a hard time thinking about anything else. We have a hard time moving on to anything else. And this starts to develop that aggressive behavior, that moodiness. And in children, I think the biggest one that I see with like YouTube's addictions and things like that, addictive behavior toward YouTube, I should say, to be technically correct, is that moodiness, right? Starting to get moody, starting to get snappy, start having some behavior issues, and start having some focus issues, because only thing they can think about is wanting to see another YouTube video. The only thing they can think about is wanting to get on social media for adults, right? We get that way from time to time. I've seen it a lot, right? So we know that some of the symptoms of addictive behavior of social media are aggression, moodiness, rebelliousness, uncontrollably stuck on it, or difficulty controlling our thoughts, which causes headaches, tension headaches, high blood pressure, higher stress levels, insomnia, which we'll get to in a minute. I'm not sure what I wrote there. Does that say shakiness? That doesn't seem right. Sneakiness. That's it. That's what it was. So the causes of insomnia, how many of you guys have thought, well, I really need to go to bed. Before I go to bed, I'm just going to get on Facebook for a minute and see what my grandma cooked tonight or whatever. And then pretty soon you find yourself scrolling, looking at everything everybody else posts, looking at conversations and arguments people are having, looking at all sorts of things, some that make you laugh, some that make you cringe. And the thing is think about this. When you're going through YouTube and stuff, you say you like it because it makes you laugh. Does every video make you laugh? Is every single thing you look at good?
No.
Or does some things pop up in between that maybe make you frustrated? Maybe you don't want to see. Maybe they're upsetting in some way.
Yes, definitely.
That's the thing. So in our minds, we think we're consuming something that's making us feel better. But in between the lines, it's things that make us feel worse. It's things that we don't want to see. It's negative things, right, along those lines. And I'm not saying that it's entirely a bad thing. And we're going to get to the positives of YouTube and social media in a minute. But I just want to go over some of the negatives first. So that and at night, it can cause insomnia. We start going through it. Next thing you know, we wasted an hour. We're going to bed an hour and a half, 2 hours later. We're also going to bed slightly more frustrated with our higher blood pressure. So then we have to take some extra time to relax again before we fall asleep, which creates a cycle of insomnia. Now, the last one I'd mentioned was sneakiness. And this is adults and kids alike, right? If someone points out to you your addictive behavior towards something, your addictive behavior towards social media, addictive behavior towards YouTube, are you more inclined for those first few days? Are you more inclined to drop it, or are you more inclined to think from time to time, oh, no one would know if I just snuck up to my room. No one would know if I just did it after they went to bed. No one would know if I just snuck into the bathroom for a little while.
The second one.
The second one. That's right. And that's how you know you've crossed the line from responsible use to addictive behavior. If you find yourself being sneaky and going behind the backs of your loved ones, you definitely know you've crossed the line once you've hit that point. And we're not talking about not necessarily just social media, YouTube, and things like that. That's anything. That's anything. When you start crossing lines like that, right? Reduced another symptoms I noticed were reduced confidence and reduced social engagement, right? Now we said, well, I'm on social media, I'm talking to people, this, that, and the other, but sometimes, as he pointed out, you're doing that in lieu of actually speaking to the person next to you, of actually speaking to people around you. I have some of the best conversations in waiting rooms because I don't have social media on my phone. I look around and other people are on social media and I'll think something or see something and I'll just make a random comment to someone else sitting there. And they kind of like look up, like I woke them up, and then I end up having some of the best conversations that way. But we tend to ignore those things if we just stick our nose in the social media and YouTube and things like that constantly. And again, as you pointed out at the beginning, doing so, we tend to not take the time to accomplish anything throughout the day, which reduces our confidence. If we're not accepting challenges and overcoming challenges in some form or fashion, day in, day out, we're kind of shunning those challenges. We're more likely to lose confidence. We're more likely to seem disinterested, unfocused, and like we just don't care, right? So those are symptoms. Now the thing is even if it's not widely recognized as an addiction, addictive behaviors always come with withdrawal symptoms. So if you realize that you're falling victim to an addictive behavior and you really want to do something about it, do expect to suffer withdrawal symptoms such as agitation, behavior issues, especially for dealing with children, difficulty focusing, insomnia, and sneakiness. Those are the biggest ones that I found. Oh, and high blood pressure. Those are the main ones that I had found. Now let's talk about if you're a family member that wants to help somebody with an addictive behavior. I want to open up and talk about my life here for a second. And back a few years ago when I struggled with addictions to social media because I was learning things about advertising, how to use it. I was excited about it. And I started catching myself with a lot of these behaviors. I think the thing that helped me the most is it got to a point, because I had spoken about addiction with Aksel, because he'd had issues with YouTube and stuff in the past. And it got to a point that he started giving me the lessons that I had given him. Now at the time he was like 6-7 years old, right? And it's nothing like being chastised by a 7-year-old when you know they're right. There's nothing quite like that to make you rethink what you're doing with your life, And I knew he was right. So it got to be where every time I'd be on my phone or something like that, he would say, "Daddy, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm just scrolling through this just for a minute." He'd go, "Well, you could be playing with me or whatever." And he would change his tone and he would sound so disappointed in me that it would break my heart, right? And that got me thinking, oh my goodness, I'm falling into this addictive behaviors the same way that he did, with electronics and blue light and YouTube and things like that. And so that got me thinking about it, but I still had a tough time kicking it. So I got to a point that I did it on a regimen, only through certain times of the day. And the thing that really, really got me was me and him spent several weeks doing a paper mache project on a bucket, right? That was going to be something for his room. And when it was finished, he added his own pieces to it and made a sign and put it on the washing machine right outside of my bathroom that basically said, "Deposit phone here." And he told me, "You put your phone in here before you go into the bathroom, so you don't have to deal with that." And that was the moment, right? That was the big moment that I was like, all right, that's it. I'm deleting all this stuff from my phone. Of course, I need to use it, and I need to get on it and look at my notifications and stuff. I use it for business. But I'm deleting it from my phone so that I don't habitually check it constantly. Because when I have to go to the computer and check it, I'm much more likely to be on it responsibly, right? I might scroll a little bit, but it's never in a way that takes away from my family time or takes away from my responsibilities, because I have to go through a few extra steps to be able to see it. Now, I still have Instagram on my phone. Mostly because I never found Instagram to be terribly addictive. I mean, I never find myself scrolling through it. But of course, they have tools put in for that, right? Like on Instagram, I don't know if you know this, but when you're scrolling through Instagram, it's mostly all visuals, pictures, videos. And when you're scrolling through, when you get to a certain point, usually within, for me, it's usually within like 10 or 15 posts, it says, that's it for today. That's all that's new for today. Anything after that is just suggested content, and it's usually nothing I find interesting anyway. So, like, that's one that I don't tend to have as much of an issue with. What was a moment for you that you noticed that you were having, I mean, we've been through it a few times, that you were having addictive behaviors or showing symptoms of addictive behaviors in relation to YouTube or electronics?
A long time ago when I had a phone and
Now, it wasn't a phone that was turned on. It was a
Yeah.
phone that worked like a tablet, right? He could put stuff on it, but it wouldn't make calls. Okay, go ahead.
And I asked my mom to if I could watch YouTube, and she said no. I got really angry. My dad was at the other side. I dashed over there and then hid in a corner and started watching YouTube. And
There's that sneaky behavior. And the aggressiveness.
yes,
You didn't like being told that maybe you should be paying attention to something else for a while, right? So, one of the ways that what's something that helped you through it? Like what helped you decide, okay, I need to start moderating how much of this I do?
You guys, my mom, you, and a bunch of my other friends, they started wanting me to play with them like imagination. And so I was like, it's time for me to get off of this. Let's start doing more imaginationing things.
Can you think of any one specific thing myself or your mom as parents did that just stuck with you that's helped you ever since? Like recognize when you're having issues?
Yes, at the story I just told, you guys helped me in that moment about.
What did we do? What was so helpful about what we did?
Oh, so long ago.
I remember.
I can't remember what you guys told me, but I remember that's what helped me get off that type of stuff.
I remember trying to calmly talk with you,
Yeah.
and you got really aggressive and really mean with me. And I stayed calm, and I remember saying something along the lines of, do you see how angry you are at me? Why are you so angry at me? And you didn't have an answer. And so after a few seconds of thinking about it, you didn't have an answer, you were kind of grumbly. I said, well, I think I know. I think I know why you're so frustrated. I think you're developing an addictive behavior towards YouTube, which can cause you to do this, and it's caused by this. Basically the same discussion we just had here. And you were still a little frustrated, but I remember your eyes kind of opening a little wider and being like, maybe that's true. And then, the very next day you started trying to do different, right? Now let's talk about some positives, though. There's positives to social media. There's positives to YouTube. Can you think of one positive? You've already said one earlier in the video.
One positive about
One good thing about it.
it lets you escape stuff.
Let you escape your day-to-day stuff, because sometimes we need to recharge. The issue is when we start prioritizing recharging over accomplishing. There needs to be balance in all things, right? That's our philosophy at the school, balance in all things. You've got to balance your recharge time with your I'm going to go get some stuff done time. I'm going to go grind time, right? And if you start to do more of one than the other, you're out of balance. Even if you start to grind more than you escape, it's out of balance, and you will burn yourself out and have these exact same symptoms. Whichever way you push that balance, it's going to happen. I think some other positives are you can learn new things.
Yeah.
You can search up things to learn. That's one of the ways I use YouTube in particular the most is searching up, learning how to do different things, learning how to approach different things. I like to watch speeches and talks by behavioral psychologists, for example, because of what I do. I teach martial arts. I motivate people, so I like to get on there and look at behavioral psychology. Or maybe, best practices for planting a particular plant or seedling. Whenever I have a question that's like, I don't know how to do this, I might go to something like that. And that's a positive thing, right? Another positive is that you can connect with people. You can connect with people and share things, but it's not an interpersonal connection like face-to-face is, right? The thing is 90% of what you see on social media is faked, and we all know it because we all fake it, right? Because when we post stuff, we tend to all be a little less real, right? It's just like how palmistry works. You guys know palm readers? It's like how palmistry and astrology work, you know? A palmistry person can say, hey, I'm going to read your palm, and I can say, for example, oh, you're a stubborn one. You tend to resist change. And would you agree?
Yeah.
Why do you agree? Because the first thing he went to think about is moments that he was stubborn. And everybody's stubborn sometimes. So he's going to find moments he was stubborn, and he's going to agree. He's going to say, yeah, I'm stubborn. Yeah. But if 3 hours later I go back to him and I say, wow, you're really flexible and you handle change really well. What are you going to say?
I'm not sure.
You're going to say that's true, and you don't want to say it right now, right? You're going to say that's true, even though it's the exact opposite of what I just said. Why are you going to say that's true? Because the brain naturally looks for instances where we were flexible and you did enjoy change and you did accept change, which everybody does as well, balancing all things, right? But the brain tends to only look at the things that prove the cause, right? So no matter what I say, you're going to have some kind of example of how that pertains to you, and you're going to agree with me. That's how palmistry and things like that works, right? It's kind of a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is a very interesting thing about behavioral psychology. Tasha, we're discussing addictive behaviors towards social media and YouTube. And now that I stopped to say that, I forgot why I was talking about palmistry. Oh.
Like accepting changes and...
Right. But we tend to... I was talking about connecting and sharing, the positives of social media and stuff like that, connecting and sharing. So, but I was saying that 90% of what we post is fake, and we know this because most of what each of us individually post is at least semi-faked, because most of the stuff we share is going to be things that we look at, right? We see a meme, we look at something, and just like when a palmist says what I was just doing with him, we're going to look at what are some times when that did apply to me. And we're only going to look for times that apply to us, and we're immediately going to go, oh yeah, that applies to me, and we're going to share it. Now, a meme that says the exact opposite can pop up, and a week later, and when we see that, we're going to think about times that meme applied to us. That's all we're going to be able to think. And then we're going to say, yeah, that does apply to me, and we're going to share it again. And that's why, you see a lot of people's posts really go back and forth and are so often hypocritical with each other. It has to do with the same behavioral psychology that makes astrology and palmistry and reading head bumps and tea leaves work. It works because you're giving a loaded, broad question that will apply to everybody, because everybody has balances on both ends. And when the brain naturally only looks for things that prove the cause, then they're going to feel like that applies to them. Most people's brains don't look for the things that are missing, don't look for the things that don't approve the cause. That's why the books about Sherlock Holmes were so popular. That's why they were so big. It was the first series of detective novels that played with the idea of this person who was better at solving crimes because they saw what didn't happen instead of what did happen. Looking for what did happen is the normal human way the brain works. So by creating a character that solved his crimes based on what didn't happen, it was something very exciting and new and foreign to a lot of people. And that's what made the books so intriguing and exciting as mystery novels, right? I post all the things not so great on my Facebook because life around here is always sunshine and rainbows. Yeah, but my point is it does, it's one of the positives. It does allow us to connect and share. But that also brings up one of the negatives we spoke about earlier, which is not realizing how much negativity when we're scrolling through that we see in between the positivity that kind of drags us down. Because every post that we see, the first thing we're going to think of is, does this apply to me? If it doesn't, we scroll on. If it does, we might sit on it for a little while. Guys, I've been studying social media advertising for years. This is how social media advertising works. Getting a post and a visual that makes a person stop and ask, does this apply to me? And feel like maybe it pulls that they do. The entire aspect of social media advertising, I'm going to give away one of my secrets here. The entire aspect of social media advertising and posting for businesses relies on the same techniques that palmists, astrologers, and people who read tea leaves use. By using a broad question or a broad statement, it forces a person to see how, because they're always going to look, remember, they're never going to look for what's not missing, what doesn't prove the cause. They're only going to look for what does prove the cause. So by using a broad statement, it gets more people to go, oh yeah, that applies to me, which gets more people to click, more people to watch, and more people to go to your website, more people to do whatever it is that you're asking them to do. This is how social media advertising works. The good advertisers. The advertisers that don't do so well are the ones that are just like, that just do sales stuff all the time. Just sale, and don't really talk about what they do. And that's why the best of social media advertisers are storytellers. They tell stories in ways that relate to the majority of people that they are trying to target, that they are trying to get their message to. And there's ethical ways to do that. There's ethical and unethical ways to do that. I like to stick with the ethical stuff. Anyway, I was talking about the positives of the social media and this, that, and the other. But go back to the beginning of the video. Talk about what we were talking about, the causes of addictive behavior towards social media and YouTube, the symptoms in both children and adults to addictive behavior, social media, YouTube. Me and Aksel shared some personal stories about when we both faced these kind of addictive behaviors and when we realized it and what helped us overcome it. These are really, really helpful things for parents and stuff like that. Now, we're just speaking from our own experience here. We talked about the symptoms like aggression, moodiness, rebelliousness. What was another symptom of addictive behavior?
Oh,
Stuck on it?
Oh, yeah.
Getting stuck on it, right? And what was the one you brought up? There was a symptom that you brought up. You were saying that, Mommy, I should get off something, and you ran over to my side. What symptom did that show?
That showed being upset, angry, and being rebellious, I think the word.
Rebellious and sneaky. Sneakiness. Absolutely, it's sneakiness. Of course, storytelling ads tend to be your favorite. Those are the people that really know what they're doing, that really have mastered the game of social media advertising, is the ones that can tell a piece of a big story in a small piece in the matter of a few seconds to get somebody who is seeing it to instantly relate to what they see, which makes them spend a little more time on it, which allows the advertiser to give their information. And through giving that information, they hopefully spark some sort of response, such as a comment, a share, clicking a link, whatever that case may be. And that's what they drive. That's driving traffic, right? Aksel's been learning a lot of this from me in the past couple of weeks. It's kind of an interesting but really big and complex subject, isn't it?
Yes.
Took me years to understand this. I'm still learning all the time. And I bring that up because it's exactly like doing martial arts. When you're doing martial arts, you tend to start with this idea of, okay, I'm going to stick with it and I'm going to get to the point where I earn my black belt. Then I'm going to be really, really good. But the thing is anything that we start to learn, we feel that way, right? We set a goal and we go, okay, I'm going to make this goal. But then part of the way through, as we start feeling more and more and more like we understand what we're doing. We feel better and better and better about it until suddenly there's this point. In martial arts, it usually happens around the 6 month to 1 year mark, where we suddenly drop and realize, oh man, I know a lot less than I thought I did. And then we start, okay, now I really understand it. Now I'm really starting to get it. And then a big drop. Wow, there's a lot more to this than I thought, right? And that moment is around the black belt, the first degree black belt. And that's why I share things all the time that say getting a black belt doesn't mean you've mastered anything. It means that you've been taught the basics and you've learned just enough to realize how little you actually know and how much more there is to learn. And that's the same thing in anything that you're doing. You'll tend to feel more confident about it at the beginning and then drop off and then feel more confident. And then about the time you're really starting to understand it is where you'll drop off again and feel like, oh wow, there is so much more to learn. And that's when you get hooked on the learning. That's when you get hooked for life. Like, okay, I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to keep going. And that'll keep going the whole time that you're challenged. But the second you don't feel challenged is the second you drop off. That's the second you're going to stop learning. I'm at the I know nothing point. That's exactly it, Tasha. That's exactly where you're supposed to be. That's exactly where I was. I started teaching and was feeling like I knew nothing, right? So, again, those are some of the symptoms of addictive behavior, and it does happen with social media and YouTube, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it happens at all ages. So as parents, and even as kids, we can look out for each other, because it's not always easy to see when you are showing those behaviors. Sometimes you need somebody a little disappointed in you to point it out, to make a positive change, right? To get there. And like I said, We went over several positives of social media and YouTube as well. The trick is in moderation, right? The trick is knowing when, how, where, and not overdoing it, and making sure we're still taking on challenges today. We're still working towards our goals each and every single day. So what are some recommendations? Some recommendations for anybody that is struggling a little bit with using a little too much social media, being on there too much. They realize it's affecting their mood and their attitude towards their family. They realize they're getting stuck on things that other people say on social media, which doesn't really matter because it's just a tiny little message, and who knows if they even mean it or not, because there's tons of trolls on there, right? So what are some recommendations that you would have for a kid that realizes that they're struggling with these behaviors? What's something you would do to help a friend struggling with these behaviors?
I would really help them, like, if they start getting on their phone and, like, you want to play something and, like, ignoring you and they're just going through Facebook or whatever.
So trying to encourage them to do something else.
Yeah.
With you.
Yes.
So that they get some social interaction, right? That's a good one. Do you have any other recommendations?
With yourself, I would go to a teammate, your sister, brother, mother, father, and ask them to watch out for you while you're, like, going through something.
This kid here is out for my job. I done stole all the next of my words out of my mouth. Sound just like me, man. Wow. Okay, but I had one more. I had one more recommendation. Escape is good. But, you know, we've all heard it since we were young. Take breaks. Take regular breaks. The younger a person is, the more often they need to take a bit of a break. As Aksel, how often do you feel like you need to take a break before you start feeling a little addictive towards it?
10 to 15 minutes, and then how long you take the break is 20 to...
Oh, so you think 10 to 15 minutes of watching YouTube, for example, and then a 20, 25-minute break?
Yeah.
I think that's even a little low, right? I would say probably for every 20 to 30 minutes on YouTube, taking a 15-minute break is what I'd recommend for kids your age and younger. Now, adults can consume more like a half hour to an hour, but then need 15 to 20 minutes of a break, right? And it's not just, like, we've all been told it's just about resting your eyes. We got told that as kids with video games and stuff like that, but it's not just about resting your eyes. It's about breaking the cycles of addictive behavior in your mind. It's about creating a good balance between escape and learning, and then challenging yourself and being in the real world. A good balance between spending some time escaping to the digital world and spending some time interacting with those around you in the real world.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to add to that? We didn't say anything funny this time. Last time we said a bunch of funny stuff. I know, because I took some clips. I don't know. I got nothing. You got anything funny? Thank you guys for the comments, by the way. We really, really appreciate comments, shares. Those are the things that help your local businesses reach farther, and their stories and messages reach farther, so that we're able to work with and help more people become the best that they can be through learning how to take on small step challenges one at a time, overcome them to gain more confidence, while at the same time, what's another thing we teach our students?
We teach our students to try to be in the real world and make more friends.
Make friends. Turn work into fun. I'm sorry, I thought you finished it for me. Turn work into fun. That's one of the things. How about, and through that, learning to...
Look with our eyes.
Focus better. Look with our eyes, listen with our ears, think with our brain about what we're doing, not be stuck on something else, and then doing the right things, right? So we teach them how to focus better, we teach them how to handle their responsibilities better. Guys, martial arts isn't just about the physical, though the workout helps. What happens is they come in and they get the workout, right? And they do that physical stuff, and that starts to release a chemical in the brain that starts to make them feel happier, more excited, and it also makes them more responsive to things. This gives us a chance to then teach them about responsibilities, confidence, focus, and things like that. I like to start things off a little bit physical, right? So that people will be more responsive. I read a meme earlier today. I'll give you a second to talk. Hold on to that thought. I read a meme earlier today, and it's very, very true. And this was from a behavioral psychologist as well, that said the average person takes 400 repetitions to learn something, unless it's fun. If it's fun and they're enjoying it, it only takes 20. 20 repetitions to learn something. That is a huge difference in a learning curve if a person at a young age can be taught to have fun with their work and have fun with their learning. All right, go ahead.
I have wise words.
Wise words. He's got wise words of wisdom.
Don't pet the smelly things, pet the furry things.
That's almost what I said in the last one. That's almost what I said in the last one. I have a comment. Don't you love how they told us one thing was the reason for doing certain things as children? You grow up, you learn there's so much more to it. For me, usually those are the reasons that would actually make me listen to the don't do the things statements. Actually, believe it or not, there's a reason for that. I've been reading a book by a behavioral psychologist recently who actually delved into detail about why that happens, Tasha. Why that happens. So if you go back to when we were kids, there was far less emphasis on consumer information. Okay? So what I mean by that is businesses cared much less about tested theories and methods that work on people psychologically, and they were far more interested in just going with their gut and intuition. So basically, why that happened, why when we were young, a lot of the reasons, they knew that you could only give a kid one reason to try to convince them not to do something, because too many reasons and it gets too complicated. And someone just chose the reason, for example, of it'll hurt your eyes, watching TV too long, thinking that would be enough to convince kids not to spend too much time on the TV. But there was no market research about that. There was no consumer research. Nobody did that kind of thing because it was nearly impossible to get that kind of information from consumers because no one completed surveys. Mostly because no one knew how to get people to complete surveys. Since then, we have learned so much more in the realm of behavioral psychology. There was an explosion through the 90s and early 2000s in the understanding of behavioral psychology and how to get people to participate in surveys and how to get consumer information. There was also an explosion in corporate CEOs and business leaders learning to use that information to better tailor their message to the consumers instead of just using their own kind of insight and instinct, right? So that is the reason that we were told a reason that didn't work for us. Like, oh, it'll hurt your eyes if you watch too long. Oh, you'll go blind. When there were other reasons that would have worked much, much better, like talking to us about addictive behaviors and how it would affect our mood. The thing is there wasn't enough consumer research done to realize whether that would have an impact on the audience or not, right? Whether that would have an impact on whether people would change their mind or not. So basically a guy up somewhere just intuitively said, I think if we tell kids they'll go blind by watching TV, that'll make them take breaks more often. Didn't work, obviously, because that wasn't a reason that was going to attach to us on an emotional level. It wasn't going to attach to us on a storytelling level, right? Like I was talking about with social media ads earlier. To be able to influence somebody, you've got to be able to attach with them in a level that makes them think, or in a way that makes them think, oh yes, that does apply to me, right? And so, for example, how they learn to get people to perform more surveys, right? Consumer surveys and stuff like that. You guys have all been asked, will you complete our survey for a chance to win $500? And that never works, right? How many of you guys actually do that, right? There's very few of us actually do anything like that. But research has shown you don't have to offer a $500 prize. You don't have to offer a free ice cream to fill out the survey. All you need to do to get people to actually complete that survey is ask them one question first. Do you think you're a helpful person? Would you define yourself as a helpful person?
Yes.
Okay, well then would you mind doing this survey for me? Because it'll help us out a lot making sure that we can serve you better.
Okay.
Just by changing to adding that question first, instead of offering incentives, in studies, there was an 83% increase. 83%! That's more than 3/4 increase in the amount of people who perform the survey. Crazy, right? Who would have thought? And of course, nobody would have thought that. Nobody understood that in the 80s, 90s, even the early 2000s. We only began to understand this through the late 90s, early 2000s, is when we began to understand, wow, there is evidence that says how we word something and how we approach somebody changes whether they will do something or not. The science of behavioral influence, right? So what makes that work? By asking someone a question, known as a single shoot question, just like we talked about with palmistry and tea leaf reading earlier, by asking you a question that you're going to want to say yes to. No one wants to say they're not helpful unless they really are just rude, right? Very few people want to say that. By asking you that question first, it makes you think of examples and times when you were helpful. And they're like, oh yeah, I am helpful. I've been helpful before. I'm thinking of all the times I'm helpful. And then if I immediately get asked to do something helpful, I go, oh, here's a chance to be helpful again. And I'm more likely to do it.
I exactly thought about the times I was helpful.
Exactly. This is a psychological influence trick known as single shoot questioning, because it gets somebody's brain to run down a single shoot, which gets them into a feeling and mood that you want them to be in before you ask for a request. And it works 80% better than when you just say, hey, will you complete this survey for a chance to win $500? Nobody cares about that, right? And still, look around at companies doing this today. Still, so many companies have not bothered to learn these tricks. You still see companies all the time going with the same old, thinking it'll work, getting 4, 3, 2% of people to actually participate in their surveys, and they don't do it. People don't do it, and they don't know why. So they just stand happy with that without getting actually a good cross-reference of information about their consumers. All they have to do to get a better cross-reference of information about their consumers is A, start with a question, like a single shoot question, and B, make the surveys fun. I don't know if you guys have ever seen one of our surveys. Our surveys have really fun, interesting, they're all multiple choice, and they have really just, I'm going to say dumb possibilities, right? There'll be 2 possible choices that are actually with the question, how do we treat you today? Treated me great, treated me terrible, I never want to come back. And then 2 funny ones, right, that are just ridiculously off the wall answers. And people respond to those surveys. People really respond to those surveys, especially if we ask them if they feel like they're a helpful person first, before we ask them to fill out the survey. Oh, Tasha fills them out whenever she has the time. It's just furry things are smelly. It's a huge learning curve and it's difficult. Yeah, so basically the reason I delved into all that was to show why back in the 70s and 80s, we were often given reasons to do something or not to do something that we all passed off and didn't care about. And it's mostly because no one bothered to look at the consumer research to see what would attach to more people, what was catchier, what would get more people to do the healthy behavior, right? We're slowly learning how to do that now that it's the 2020s, 3-4 decades later, we're slowly starting to learn how to do that. But there you go. So there's some more insider information about advertising, social media marketing, surveys, and etc. that can help you kind of keep an eye out for how people do that. Tasha says, I might need this book. Wonder how much I could apply to helping kids with trauma. Tasha, it all applies. It all applies. And there's 2 different books. So I'll go ahead and recommend them to you. There's 2 different books. They're by a behavioral psychologist whose name is Robert Cialdini. It's actually CIA. Anyway, you'll find it. Robert Cialdini. One book is called Persuasion, which is about the moment of pre-framing to set up a persuasive moment, which is kind of what I was just talking about and discussing about with the surveys. The other book is called Persuasion. What I like about the books is it doesn't just talk about how to sell and stuff like that. These are books that talk about the ethical ways of persuading people versus the unethical ways and dishonest ways of persuading people, why to do one, why not to do the other, and why to watch out for both, right? And it's mostly written in terms of business. However, these processes could easily be applied to therapy with trauma victims, could easily be applied to teaching, could easily be applied to persuading or motivating anybody in any situation. They really are fascinating books. Persuasion and Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, and he started these studies back in 1984. He's what they call the father of persuasion science. He was one of the first behavioral psychologists to ask the question, what makes some people better at persuading than others? And then he spent several years traveling the country doing undercover, like he was doing internships undercover at different sales things and getting jobs at restaurants that had the best salespeople and stuff like that, so that he could watch their tactics and set up tests and see how these things actually played out. And these are the books he wrote about them. I actually got to hear an interview with him on the radio a couple of weeks ago that made me interested in getting the books to start with. So that's what it's about. We talked about recommendations of what to do when we fall into addictive behavior, taking breaks, making sure we keep a balance, making sure we're spending time with our friends and family, making sure we're spending imaginative time, and number 1 for me, making sure you spend time bored. Nobody likes being bored, but being bored is where our imagination grows. Being bored is when we learn more about ourselves. Being bored makes us face the things we don't want to face that are going to be better for us in the long term, mentally, in our own heads, and fight those battles that can help us out. Now, at the same time, I understand that's a dangerous place for victims of trauma or survivors of trauma, I should say, and people with some mental health struggles. That can be a dangerous space. But I'm not telling them they need to learn how to be bored or spend that time doing nothing. Fact of the matter is, most of the people that have those struggles have an issue with spending too much time in their own head and dealing with those things. Remember, moderation in all things. I think that pretty much says what we got to say, right?
Yeah.
About addictive behaviors, social media, electronics, and stuff like that. I am sorry about this live video being on the wrong day. We like to do Tuesdays. We prefer to do Tuesday late morning, but things just got crazy Tuesday, didn't they? Things got wicked crazy, and we just weren't able to. Need this to persuade the tiny one to choose violence left Austin. Yeah, to choose violence left Austin. Man, if I sat here for a little while, I could think of some of the things that I've already read in that book that could probably be useful for that. But right off the top of my head, I can only think of one. Another thing with this behavioral psychology, science of persuasion, or the moment before trying to persuade somebody, if somebody is surrounded by someone, by pictures, photos, visuals of someone that looks like that, in a particular mood or doing a particular action, they don't have to pay attention to those pictures, but if someone is in an environment with those pictures in it, they are more likely to be persuaded to do that thing. So let's apply that to your situation, Tasha. What if you had a special corner in a special room where you put up motivational pictures and posters of a child that looks like similar to the child you're speaking of, but the child in the pictures is smiling, laughing, playing, having fun, things along those lines, then that could be an environment that starts to switch subconscious triggers to go, oh, I'm not supposed to be angry. I'm not supposed to throw these blocks. I'm supposed to stack these blocks like the kid in the picture. I'm not supposed to hit people. I'm supposed to laugh with them, right? Now, it's not a fix-all, but that's just one little trick that could start to help in that way. A trick I've used with Aksel when he used to have tantrums, and then this was after he learned to talk and could understand things. I'm not talking terribly, terribly young, but he started to understand this around 3 or 4 years old, is I would use single shoot questioning, right? I would use questions that would get him to just stop, like, hey, you seem really, really angry. Can you tell me what you're angry about? And then, of course, that would usually come with like a lash out, an angry response, a hit, a throwing thing, something along those lines. And then I would act hurt. I was like, ow, that really hurt me. I don't like to be hurt. Do you like to be hurt? And he'd be angry. And I'd say, do you like to be hurt? Well, are you hurt right now? Is that why you're angry? And then that would usually come to some, point of either yes or I don't know. I don't know why I'm angry. And I would say, well, would it be more fun if we found something happier to do, something to smile about? And he would usually, and then I would tell a joke, just a little joke, where I would suggest, hey, let's go for a walk for a little while and throw some rocks at the trees. Or let's go for a walk, he still remembers this, and throw some rocks in the river. Ever wonder why I'd ask you if you wanted to go for a walk and throw rocks in the river?
To calm down.
To calm you down, because you were super angry and throwing a tantrum. That's how it started. And then it led to you just enjoying it so much you would ask to do it, right? And then it became a positive behavior that over time, across a year or so, it got helpful, right? And so that was a time of single shoot questioning. I also used to occasionally, like, he'd be angry and we'd be in the middle of that conversation and I would ask something along the lines of, do you remember the last time you were happy? Do you remember the last time you smiled? What did you smile about? And that forces him to start thinking about a time he was happy and smiling and brought him back around a little bit. Now, these things are not 100% always every time effective, right? But each one of these little tricks can add to your odds of success in dealing with a child having a complete blowout. They can increase your odds of success in being able to persuade somebody to do something more healthy for themselves. This is ethical use of persuasion, right? Bonus Love thinks it's funny when they make people cry. Yeah, no, then I wouldn't use that trick at all. Absolutely would not. Well, I use it in a different way, right? But I would look at it in a different way to do it other than the example that I gave. If they think it funny to make people cry, then I definitely wouldn't use the cry thing or anything along those lines. But, might use the can you remember the last time you smiled? Can you remember the last time you're happy? While they're in an environment where they see people like them, kids their age, having fun, playing properly, stacking blocks, whatever it may be. What was another trick that you could use for that? I lost it. I had it in my head. And then if they won't talk, another trick I used to use with Aksel was, can you draw me a face of different types of feelings? They would usually start off drawing some angry faces, and then he would draw happy faces. And then he'd draw the angry faces, and I would say something like, oh, those faces look really, really mad. I don't know. They're scary. They might give you nightmares. They might give me nightmares. You think we could draw a face that's a little less scary? And slowly, it takes time. It takes a lot of patience, especially with young children. But I'm just trying to offer a few things out there. Keep in mind, I'm only a couple of chapters into this book, so maybe there's more stuff later on, but it's certainly worth looking into. Anyway, I think we said everything we're going to say. We're going to go ahead and jump off here and go get some lunch. I was hungry.
Yes.
Hungry. All right, till we see you guys again, be the best teammate you can be. Be the best at being you.